Okay, moving on. Michelle Tongai. I haven't heard from him quite a while. Let's see what this is all about. There's an Iraq veteran who's riding his horse from Santa Monica, California to Washington, D.C., it's about 3,000 miles, to bring awareness of the effects of Agent Orange on our forgotten veterans of the Vietnam War. How about a little help in spreading the word about his mission? I don't know if I see any links here. Oh, there it is. ExpeditionOrange.org. Yeah, Vietnam was different. One of the things about Vietnam, of course, is that it was conscript army, not completely, obviously, but there were draftees there, and some people didn't have a choice. Some people didn't volunteer. I'm not up on my Agent Orange, but it seems pretty clear to me that the government was not just negligent, but just simply criminally obtuse about the effects of this on its soldiers. For those of you who may not know what Agent Orange is, Agent Orange is a form of what would I call it? It's not a pesticide. Basically, Agent Orange is designed to kill plants, and the idea would be, and I think it's because it had this bright orange color when they would kind of go crop dusting with it. So the idea is, in Vietnam we're fighting an enemy that lives in the jungle. That the jungle is the cover for much weaker forces that could never go up against us toe to toe, but they hide and launch ambushes and so on, and they do this from the protection of the jungle, which is a very, very good, I'm sure quite the best environment in the world to hide in, with the possible exception of a city, let's say, urban warfare. So somebody figured out if the communists are hiding in the jungle, and if we see them, we can kill them, why don't we just get rid of the jungle? That's pretty much it. So they sprayed this defoliant. That's the word I think I'm looking for. And basically they'd spray it over area of jungle that they wanted to secure. And I got the defoliant before J.C. Pershing did, but just barely. And so they'd spray it over an area that they wanted to get, that we wanted. We'd sprayed it over an area that we wanted to get control over. And the effects on humans and other animals apparently is not good. Defoliant, yes, there it comes, all of them. I've always felt this way. We don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know while we don't know it. And I am willing to excuse a great deal of error the first time. People make mistakes, and I don't think that I'm quite certain that nobody said, "Oh, this is going to kill our troops or maim them or cause them unbearable pain for the rest of their lives," but we're going to drop it anyway. I don't believe that for a second. I think all of this stuff was discovered after the fact. It's like thalidomide. It was what was that? Was it an antibiotic, thalidomide? It was something. Anyway, so this drug comes out called thalidomide, and they put it on the market, and then they find out after the fact that pregnant women taking thalidomide routinely had pretty horrific birth defects in their children. Nobody said, let's just go with the birth defects. They just realized that they didn't know what they didn't know. And I'm ready to excuse a fair amount of that. So what I'm trying to say here is, whether or not the government knew that this was going to hurt their soldiers, and I suspect they did not know, but once it became clear that they did know, then you can start to get to an area for me which is criminal and requires real action. If it turns out that you've got officers who knew that this was dangerous to their troops and denied that it was dangerous to their troops, denied the reports, those people need to go to jail. You wouldn't think that people like that would be in the military. You'd like to think it's not true, and I'm sorry to say it is true. These are the political generals, political officers, and so on. One of the great examples of this, which I simply couldn't believe until I saw enough evidence on it. Oh, hang on a second. What was it? Just lost it. It'll come right back. It was right here. Oh, yes. I was reading about John Boyd, and I've talked about him a lot, and the Pentagon and so on, and procurement of fighter jets and all the rest of it. But what's his name? Pierre Spray was a consultant and a contractor, I think, with the Pentagon, and he got a look at the M2 Bradley, which is for most people, I think it looks like a tank. It's basically it's a station wagon with armor on it, and you put, I don't know, 9, 12 guys inside this thing. It's got a gun on the top. It's not a tank weapon. It's it's a pretty good anti-personnel weapon. Anyway, these are armored personnel carriers, and their job is to basically take soldiers into hot zones under fire with enough armor protection to protect them from small arms fire and pretty much anything short of anti-tank round. So we had the M1 Abrams, which was a big success, and then they made the M2 Bradley to carry soldiers around behind the M1 Abrams. And the Bradley was a cool design, but there was some serious problems with it. And the problems were that it was far more lethal to the crews than they had expected it to be when they designed and built it. Again, that to me is a forgivable expense, a forgivable offense, I meant to say, because you don't know what you don't know. But once they started testing the Bradleys and found out that they were just, all this spall would come in, a round like a rocket propelled grenade or something would hit the outside of this vehicle, and molten metal would just jet out throughout the inside and wound or kill everybody in there. When it became known that that was done, and that it was a defect in the design, you would think that generals would just simply say, oh dear God, what has happened? Pull these things out of service immediately, and let's find out how fast we can get some repairs in there. How fast can we fix this problem? But that's not what happened. The generals who had been part of the program absolutely denied it. And then, to give you an idea of how far this will go, Spray was talking about that they would do tests on the Bradley, and the Pentagon was going to shoot an RPG, which we're all familiar with, those kind of conical-looking rocket-propelled grenades, are like a bazooka. And so the Pentagon knew that the Bradleys had this kind of problem. And so when they tested them with RPGs, they found out that these things were having all these horrible side effects, and if somebody had been in them, they would have been killed. So what did they do? Did they say, here's a problem, we need to fix it? No, what they did was they would do their test on the Bradley, where they'd fire a round into the Bradley, but instead of there being fuel in the fuel tanks, there was water in the fuel tanks. They put water in the fuel tanks to suppress the fires and to suppress, a lot of the explosive effects and the spalling and all the rest of it. They put water in the fuel tanks when they did the test. And another thing they did was they used Czechoslovakian RPGs. I think the warhead is like a third or a quarter as explosive as the Russian Chinese ones. And so basically what they're doing is they've got this kind of, pantomime of, oh, look, see, we shot an RPG at it. It's fine. Well, it's fine because you used a very weak RPG, and the tanks on the Bradley were filled with water, which is not a combat situation as far as I'm aware. I'm not sure that they could send them into combat with water in the fuel tanks. So that's simple deception. That's just simple, plain criminal intent. It's not even negligence. That's just murder. And the idea that officers of any rank would be sending soldiers into combat in vehicles that they knew were defective, and that they also knew, and it wasn't like a sort of a sell. They made a calculation that basically said, okay, if we admit we've got this problem, then my career's over. So instead of that, I'm going to let these young officers and young American enlisted men go out and get killed because I want my what? Vincent just checked in. Vincent, you're going to have to rewind the tape because we gave you a gigantic, huge Eagle Scout welcome, and I just say it to you again. I just glanced over and noticed you were here. Congratulations on an enormous achievement, and I think the first 5 or 10 minutes of this show was dedicated to you, so congratulations. We're very, very proud of you. Okay, so there you go. So Agent Orange and all the rest of it, and we can make mistakes. What we can't do is we can't cover up our mistakes. That's where it gets to be criminal. So Thanks for bringing that to my attention, Michelle. And it's expeditionorange.org. And I'm sure the links for the rest of it are there. Okay.